Thank you for joining Sports Development Series. We yours truly, Boma Ekiyor.
Go over the overall history background of the Ballon d'Or. So it's a French football award, basically, right? I think as of today, the French magazine L'Equipe is the main purveyor of the collection of the votes. And if I'm not mistaken, the Ballon d'Or has been around since the 1950s. I want to say 1956 was the first time they actually gave the award. And when the award was first created, it was really created in the spirit of European football. It wasn't a global award. It was created only to award the best European player of the year at the time. But it was called the Ballon d'Or. Right? So as you can imagine, if you look at the history of the list of winners, you'll see glaringly missing names like those of Garincha and Pelé and Rivelino and guys of that ilk and stature that ruled world football when it came to the World Cups in the 60s and 70s. Because, again, the award was not a world award. It was only a European-based award. And I think sometime about 2000 and – okay. They changed the rules in 1995 to include anybody playing in Europe from any country of origin. And as you remember, this is when one George Weah immediately won the award that very first year in 1995. George Weah from Liberia, of course, our own African brother. He remains to this day the only African that has ever won the award, but he was the first non-European to win the award. But of course, as soon as they opened it up to players playing in Europe, you started seeing names like Ronaldo, the real Ronaldo, they say. Ronaldo da Lima, I think, from Brazil, the number 9 striker.
Yeah.
So I seen basically Brazilians, Kaká, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo. Those guys all won the awards in those accompanying. And in the years that followed, it still sort of has this European, it's a European-centric feel. Now, in 2007, I believe, again, don't quote me exactly on the dates, but somewhere around that region, they revised the rules again to say, okay, let's open it up to everybody from around the world. But you and I both know that football is Eurocentric. In essence, the best players play in Europe, the best leagues are in Europe, so it will take moving of lots of Earth and planets for somebody outside of a league in Europe to ever win or even get nominated for the Ballon d'Or. Now, interestingly, for about 5 years or so, up to about 2015, FIFA joined up with L'Equipe to now name the Ballon d'Or the FIFA Ballon d'Or. So for those years, FIFA's World Player of the Year and the Ballon d'Or were merged into one.
Yeah, it was announced during the 2010 World Cup.
Exactly.
In South Africa.
At the end of 2015, the association between FIFA and L'Equipe was ended. Now, I don't know what the details are, but again, with my skeptical mind, anytime FIFA, anything happens with FIFA, I always think Mago Mago is in the midst of it all. But whatever the reason is, they decided to end their association. And now FIFA does what's called the world's best. They have their own award for the world's best. And while the L'Equipe has decided to keep the format of Ballon d'Or, people still look at it as European Player of the Year, but then UEFA decided to actually just recently come up with their own award for European Best. So something similar to that. So UEFA Player of the Year. So a lot of times, as you may notice, that in a given year, you have multiple people winning awards, and you're like, what's going on with this? And then they just give it Ballon. So this is the history of the Ballon d'Or and all that. Now, very interesting, and since I'm still talking about the history, more very recently, again, they decided they said, let's go back and retroactively open it up to the entire world and go back and do a re-vote for all the Ballon d'Ors that have been won over the years and go back retroactively and open it up to the rest of the world and now see who would have won it based on the opinions of all living Ballon d'Or recipients. So they went and asked them to cast votes. So the only people that were asked to cast these votes were living Ballon d'Or recipients. And I think a couple of them, like Stanley Matthews, who actually is the first recipient of the award, he's from England. He played. I think he played for Ipswich Town back in. He won in 1956. So we're talking about the old school days. Maybe a George Best was dead. Somebody about four of the Ballon d'Or recipients over time had passed. So it was only the remaining people, and this was very recently in the 2000s and 10s. And of course, you can imagine a guy like Pelé just populated the list for about 6 or 7 years. But of course, the official winners still remain the ones that have received the award. They're not going back and moving it to them. So that's just a brief historical concept of Ballon d'Or.